My name is Emma. I'm 47 years old, and for most of my life, I was nothing more than a shadow of who I truly was. For 25 years, I had been living in a toxic marriage to Mark, controlled, belittled, and constantly reminded of my inadequacies. But after I left him, everything changed. I moved in with my son Jason and started a new life, one that I never thought I could have. I thought I was free. It was during this time that I met Chris. At first, he seemed like the perfect man, charming, thoughtful, and attentive. He was different from Mark in every way. He listened to me, made me laugh, and showed me affection in ways I hadn't felt in years. I was drawn to him, and for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was love for me outside the prison I had lived in for so long. Everything felt perfect. We went on dates, shared long talks, and everything seemed to fall into place. I moved into my own space with Jason, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was finally building a future for myself. But things began to change. It started off small. Chris would stay out late, and when I asked him about it, he'd offer some excuse about work or needing time for himself. At first, I didn't think much of it. After all, he was just being a man, right? But then the phone call started. Late-night texts.
I miss you too.
And the subtle distance that grew between us.
I'll see you soon.
It wasn't until one evening when I walked into the kitchen that I overheard a conversation that shattered everything. Chris was on the phone with Darla, one of his co-workers. His voice was soft, intimate, and he spoke to her like they shared something more than just casual work conversations. "I can't wait to see you tonight. I'll make sure she's out of the way," he said, unaware that I was standing there listening. I didn't say a word. I didn't even confront him right then and there. No, I wanted more. I needed proof. Something undeniable that would confirm the gut feeling I had been trying to push away. The following days were a blur. Every time I looked at Chris, I felt a sickening sense of betrayal knotting in my stomach. I began watching him closely. I watched him walk in and out of the house, his phone always in hand, always on the move, always secretive. And then one day I found it. It was a text, a simple message, but it hit me like a ton of bricks. "Can't wait to get you alone again. It feels so right when we're together." That was it. I wasn't imagining things. Chris was having an affair with Darla. I stood frozen in that moment, holding his phone in my hand. My heart raced, my hands shook, but my mind was clear. I wasn't going to stay in this anymore. I wasn't going to keep pretending. The next day I confronted him. And for the first time I saw the truth in his eyes. He didn't even try to deny it. Instead, he shrugged as if this was just another excuse to keep the lies going. But I was done. I packed my things, told Jason we were leaving, and I walked out the door. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I just walked away, leaving behind the man who promised me everything but gave me nothing. For the first time, I felt in control. For the first time, I knew I was going to be okay. And as I left that house behind, I didn't look back. After leaving Chris, I thought the hardest part was over. But what I didn't realize was that the storm had only just begun. For the first time in 25 years, I was alone, really alone. Jason, my son, was supportive, more than I had ever expected. He had always been the strong one, the one who kept his emotions hidden while I carried the weight of my broken marriage. I thought that moving in with him, away from the mess of Chris and the memories of my old life, would give me peace. But peace was a foreign concept to me now. It didn't take long for Chris to start calling. The first call was a shock. The second was a nuisance. By the fifth call, I was exhausted. He was pleading, telling me how sorry he was, how he never meant to hurt me, how Darla was just a moment of weakness. I didn't answer any of his calls, but the messages came pouring in. He was desperate. And for the first time, I realized I had control. But it wasn't just the calls that kept coming. There were other things that I didn't understand at first. Unmarked packages, strange emails, and even anonymous messages on my social media. I blocked and reported everything, but I felt the walls closing in. It was like Chris wasn't going to let me go. And then there was Darla. One night, Jason and I were sitting down to dinner when the phone rang. It was a blocked number. I hesitated for a moment, then answered it, thinking it was just another one of Chris' desperate attempts. But it wasn't. "Emma," the voice on the other end said, cold and clipped. "It's Darla." I couldn't speak. She continued, "You think you've won, don't you? You think that by leaving him, by walking out, you've got the upper hand. But you don't know everything." My heart pounded. I felt the blood rush to my head. "What are you talking about?" I finally managed to say. "Chris has been hiding things," Darla said, almost in a taunting way. "Big things. You think you're done with him? Think again. He's not the man you think he is." Before I could respond, she hung up. I sat there, frozen, the phone still pressed to my ear. It was like everything I thought I knew was being turned upside down. The next morning, I did what any sane person would do. I went to the police. I needed to know what Chris had been hiding, what he had been doing behind my back. What was this new mess that Darla was talking about? I told them about the abuse, about his infidelity, and about all the strange things that had been happening since I left him. But they needed proof. They needed more than just my word. So I started digging. What I found sent chills down my spine. Chris had been involved in something far darker than I could have imagined. I won't go into the details, it's still hard to talk about. But the truth came to light when I uncovered a series of illegal activities that Chris had been a part of. Money laundering. Fraud. He had been using his position at work to manipulate people, and I had no idea. Everything I thought I knew about Chris, every piece of the puzzle I had been trying to make sense of, fell into place. I wasn't just dealing with a cheating, abusive man, I was dealing with a criminal. It was the tipping point. It was time to make sure he couldn't hurt me or anyone else, ever again. When the police finally started investigating Chris, I had no idea how far things would go. I still remember the day they showed up at my door. It wasn't just a typical knock. It was the kind of knock that made your stomach drop, the kind you know means something serious. I opened the door to find two officers standing there, their faces serious, and behind them, a dark sedan with tinted windows. I felt the weight of the moment before they even spoke. "Are you Emma Henderson?" one of the officers asked. I nodded, anxiety building in my chest. "Yes." "We need to speak with you about your ex-husband, Christopher Henderson," the officer continued. "We have reason to believe he's been involved in some illegal activities." I felt the room spin. I couldn't even bring myself to answer them right away. I stood there, paralyzed by the thought that everything I had tried to leave behind had somehow followed me into this new life. They handed me a piece of paper with an official notice and explained that they had found evidence of Chris being involved in a series of illegal activities. They were charging him with financial fraud, money laundering, and a number of other serious crimes. I couldn't breathe. I had thought that the worst of it had been his infidelity, the emotional abuse, the cheating. But this was far beyond anything I could have prepared for. It felt like my entire world was falling apart all over again. Only this time there was no one to blame but him. The officers assured me that they would be doing everything to make sure Chris was held accountable. But in the back of my mind, I knew this was only the beginning. Things escalated quickly after that. Chris was arrested, but not before he tried to make one last attempt to reach out to me. I received a letter from him while he was in jail, filled with his usual lies and pleas for forgiveness. It was the same song and dance I had heard so many times before. But I wasn't falling for it anymore. I went to court. I gave my testimony detailing everything Chris had done to me, his emotional and physical abuse, his cheating, and now his criminal activities. The court was merciless with him. The charges piled up and soon he was facing serious time behind bars. As the months passed, I watched Chris's life spiral into chaos. He lost everything. His job, his home, his reputation, all of it crumbled before his eyes. Darla left him too. The woman he had betrayed me with walked away, leaving him with nothing. But there was one thing Chris had forgotten. He had made his own bed and now he had to lie in it. While Chris was hiding from the law, trying to cover up his mistakes, I was rebuilding my life from the ground up. I found a new sense of freedom that I had never experienced before. It was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. For the first time, I didn't feel trapped. I didn't feel small. I had learned a hard lesson about love, trust, and betrayal. But what I learned the most was that no one, no matter how deeply they've hurt you, has the power to control your future. And as I walked away from Chris's mess, I found something I never thought I would have: peace. It's funny how much strength you can find when there's nothing left to lose. I had spent so many years living in the shadow of other people's choices, my ex-husband's, Chris's, and even my own. But after everything that happened, after Chris was arrested and my world was ripped apart again, something changed. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. Jason was my rock through it all. He had always been the one to keep me grounded, and now he was watching me in a way that made me realize just how much he had learned from me. The strength, the courage to walk away from what didn't serve me anymore, he had learned all of that from watching me. It wasn't just the legal battles I had to deal with. Chris's trial dragged on for months, but it felt like time was standing still. I was prepared for the worst, but somehow the worst never came. Every day I focused on what mattered, me, Jason, and building a life that was my own. I started therapy, something I had never considered before. It wasn't easy, opening up about the abuse, the manipulation, and the years of pain I had buried deep inside me. But slowly I started to untangle the mess in my mind. I began to understand that I had let fear guide my choices for far too long. I had been afraid of leaving Mark, afraid of being alone, afraid of facing the truth. But now I wasn't afraid anymore. The first few months after the trial were the hardest. I spent many nights lying awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if Chris would somehow find his way back into my life. He had always known how to manipulate, how to twist things until they made sense in his favor. I had been his victim for so long that I wasn't sure how to shake that feeling. But as time went on, I realized something. Chris was never coming back. And even if he did, I was no longer the person who would let him in. The more I focused on myself, the more I began to see the possibilities in front of me. I began to rediscover old passions, hobbies I had abandoned over the years. I joined a local book club, started taking long walks by the lake, and even took up painting again, something I hadn't done since I was in my 20s. But it wasn't just about the small things. It was about building a life that didn't revolve around someone else's mistakes. I realized that I had been waiting for permission to live my own life, and I didn't need that anymore. I was finally living for me, not for the man who had mistreated me for so long. One of the most surprising changes came when I met someone new. His name was Alex. He was kind, patient, and he understood me in a way I didn't expect. We met at a local coffee shop, both of us reaching for the last blueberry muffin at the same time. We laughed about it, and the rest, as they say, was history. It wasn't easy to open up again, to trust someone after everything I had been through. But Alex was different. He didn't push me. He didn't rush me. He respected my boundaries, and most importantly, he made me feel like I wasn't alone. It was a slow burn, a friendship that blossomed into something more. With Alex by my side, I felt like I was finally being seen for who I truly was. Not as a victim, not as someone who had been broken by the men in my life, but as someone worthy of love, respect, and happiness. Meanwhile, Chris was fading into the background, his life in shambles. He had tried to reach out a few times, but every time I ignored him, it felt like a victory. It wasn't revenge, it was peace. But the most liberating feeling came when I no longer cared about what Chris was doing. The bitterness, the anger, all of it slowly faded away. I realized that his actions didn't define me anymore. I was in control of my own narrative now. As time passed, I began to settle into my new life. The weight of the past was still there, heavy at times, but it wasn't consuming me anymore. I was learning how to live without the constant fear, the constant doubt that had once followed me around like a shadow. But Chris, for all his mistakes, hadn't been done with me just yet. The court proceedings had been brutal, each hearing peeling back another layer of the man I thought I knew. He'd lost everything, his job, his home, his reputation, but somehow he still found ways to make my life harder. In the midst of all this, I received something unexpected, a call from a lawyer. The lawyer's name was Peter Matthews, and his voice over the phone was cold, methodical. "Ms. Henderson," he began, "I'm calling in regards to the child support payments that Chris Henderson is refusing to pay. He's been avoiding payments for months, and we need to address this immediately." My stomach churned. After everything, after all the pain he'd put me through, Chris was still trying to avoid his responsibilities. But I wasn't going to let him slide this time. Not again. "You'll be hearing from my attorney soon," I told Peter, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm done dealing with him on my own." And so the battle began. I hired a lawyer, someone who knew how to deal with men like Chris, men who thought they could get away with anything because they had power or money or some twisted sense of entitlement. The fight for child support wasn't something I ever thought I'd have to fight for. I had raised Jason on my own without any help from Chris, without asking for anything. But now it wasn't about the money. It was about principle. It was about making sure Chris paid for what he had done. 4 months, my lawyer and I exchanged letters, filed motions, and waited for Chris to show up in court. But he didn't. He hid. He avoided everything, every responsibility that was his. The man who had once held my life in his hands was now reduced to nothing more than a coward. It was in one of those quiet, still moments when the legal proceedings were in limbo that I realized just how far I had come. I remembered the woman I had been when I first met Chris. The one who thought she couldn't live without him, the one who thought she had to fight for his love, for his attention. I didn't need him to survive. I didn't need him to feel whole. I was whole on my own. And it was the first time I truly believed it. When the day of the final court hearing arrived, I was ready. Chris didn't show, of course, he never did. But the judge, seeing the pattern of avoidance, ruled in my favor. Chris was ordered to pay back every cent he owed, with interest. And if he didn't? Well, the judge had made it clear that he would be facing additional legal consequences. For a moment I felt relief. Finally, some justice. But then I thought of something else. The piece of me that had once been so angry, so consumed by the need for revenge was gone. The victory wasn't sweet, it was just final. It was done. The months after the court ruling were peaceful, something I hadn't felt in a long time. For the first time in what felt like forever, I was living for myself. No more looking over my shoulder, no more wondering when Chris would pop up in my life again, trying to ruin everything I had built. The storm was over and I could finally breathe. Jason had been incredible throughout it all. Watching him grow into a young man, confident and strong, made me proud every single day. I'd always tried to shield him from the mess that was my marriage to Mark and then the chaos with Chris, but now I saw a different side of him. He was no longer just the son who supported his mother, he was becoming someone who was learning to stand on his own, someone who was taking the lessons of resilience and strength I'd tried to instill in him. And Alex, well, Alex was a new chapter in my life. I had never thought that I'd be ready for another relationship after everything with Chris. But with Alex, things felt different. He wasn't like Chris. He didn't need to be told what was important. He understood. There was no game, no manipulation, just a simple, genuine connection. We started taking things slow, really slow. It wasn't a rebound. It wasn't a distraction. It was a choice. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I had to explain myself to anyone. I could just be. Alex didn't rush me. He didn't push me into anything I wasn't ready for. He listened to me when I talked about the past, about the things I had been through. And he didn't judge me for the choices I had made, the mistakes I'd allowed myself to make. He embraced me for who I was now, not who I had been. It was through him that I found something else, peace in the present. I wasn't constantly looking back, worrying about what had happened or what might happen. I could focus on the now. We spent weekends hiking, cooking meals together, just enjoying each other's company. I had always loved nature, and being out in the fresh air, walking through forests and along streams, felt like a return to myself. I didn't have to pretend. I didn't have to keep up appearances. I could just be me. And for the first time in my life, I was okay with that. But as much as I had moved on, there were still the lingering ghosts of my past. The way Chris had haunted my life for so long, the way he had twisted everything until nothing made sense anymore. Those things didn't just vanish overnight. One evening, Alex and I were having dinner at my house, the sun setting outside, casting a golden light through the kitchen windows. We were laughing about something trivial when the phone rang. I hesitated before answering. "Emma Henderson?" the voice on the other end asked. "Yes," I said, my stomach tightening. "This is Detective Lawson from the Charleston Police Department. We've located Chris Henderson. He's been attempting to flee the country, and we need your statement in regards to his ongoing charges." The blood in my veins ran cold. My mind immediately flashed to Chris. Hiding, running like the coward he was. It had been so long since I'd heard his name, but the memory of him, the lies, the manipulation, the pain, was still so fresh. But it didn't scare me anymore. "I don't have anything to add to what I've already said," I told him, my voice steady. "Chris made his bed and now he can lie in it." The detective paused. "Understood. But there's one more thing. We've discovered he's been using false identification, trying to evade the child support payment orders. It looks like he's trying to disappear completely." I sighed, closing my eyes for a brief moment. Let him. He's done enough damage. As the conversation ended, I put the phone down and looked at Alex. For a brief second, I felt the weight of the past creep up on me. But then, just as quickly, it slipped away. Chris's mistakes didn't define me anymore. I was stronger than that. "We don't need to worry about him anymore," I said softly, more to myself than to Alex. He reached across the table, taking my hand in his. "I know," he said. "You've already come so far, Emma. And you're not alone anymore." And in that moment I realized he was right. The final chapter had been written. I had faced the man who had abused me, humiliated me, and torn my life apart. And now I was finally free. The next few weeks were calm. There was no more drama. No more fighting. No more unnecessary baggage. Just me, Alex, and Jason. The family I had always wanted. Chris was out there somewhere, hiding from his own mistakes. But I wasn't looking for him anymore. I had found something far more valuable than revenge. My own happiness. Months passed, and I began to realize that I was living in a place I had never thought possible. A place where I didn't have to look over my shoulder, where I could sleep at night without the gnawing anxiety of wondering if Chris would show up or try to pull me back into his. Things were calmer now. I had started focusing on myself, my own healing, my own future. Alex was by my side, but the relationship was different. He never rushed me, never expected me to be anyone but myself. And that, in itself, was a gift. But the truth is, moving on from my past wasn't as simple as just letting go. It took time, lots of time. I found myself caught in memories at times, even when I didn't want to. There were moments when I thought about Mark, about the years of manipulation and control I had endured, and I wondered if I had been strong enough to walk away sooner. I thought about Chris, the man who had promised me everything, only to betray me in the worst possible way. Toxic web. I still remembered the dark days, the nights I spent crying myself to sleep, the days I felt like I was suffocating in a marriage that was never meant to be. The years I wasted trying to fit into a mold I didn't belong in. Those memories, those painful lessons didn't just disappear. But what I learned is that those moments were not my story anymore. They were chapters that had already been written. I had the power now to turn the page, to move forward without being tethered to the past. I didn't need validation from Chris or from anyone to prove my worth. It was the hardest thing I had ever done, to let go of the pain, to not let it define me anymore. But I was doing it. Every day I was healing. One night, after a long walk by the lake with Alex, I found myself sitting on the porch looking at the stars. It was one of those quiet moments where everything seemed to make sense. "I'm proud of you, you know," Alex said, his voice soft as he sat down beside me. I looked over at him, surprised by his words. "For what?" "For getting here," he said. "For not letting him ruin you." I felt a lump form in my throat. I had spent so much of my life feeling like I was broken, like I wasn't enough. But here I was, not just surviving but thriving. "I'm not sure how I got here," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "But I know that I'm not who I was. I'm not the woman Chris tried to make me feel like I was. I'm not the victim anymore. I'm me. And I'm finally okay with that." Alex smiled, squeezing my hand. "You've always been strong, Emma. You just had to remember it." It was the first time I truly understood what he meant. The strength had always been inside me. I just had to learn how to tap into it again, to trust myself, to trust that I could do this on my own. Time seemed to slow down when I received the call. It was one of those moments when your heart skips a beat, and you know that something is about to shift, but you don't know how. I had been living my life in peace for months, but when I saw Chris's name flash on my phone screen, it was like the past rushed back to me all at once. I hesitated. My finger hovered over the decline button, but something inside me told me that I had to answer. Maybe it was closure I was seeking, or maybe I just wanted to see how far he had fallen. I pressed the button. "Emma," Chris's voice came through, thick with regret. "I know you're angry, but I need to talk to you. It's about the child support. I'm asking for a deal." I blinked, unsure if I had heard him right. A deal? After everything he'd done, he thought he could just waltz back into my life and strike a deal? I didn't respond at first. I let the silence sit between us for a moment. His voice came again, this time softer, almost pleading. "Please, Emma. I've been through a lot. I'm not the man I was. I want to make things right." I could feel my blood boiling. This was the same man who had abused me, betrayed me, and walked away without a second thought. And now he was asking for sympathy? Asking for a second chance? I wasn't the same woman I had been when I was with him. I was stronger, wiser, and free. I didn't need to hear anything more. I had already given him more than enough of my life. "I don't want anything from you, Chris," I said, my voice steady. "You lost that chance a long time ago. The past is behind me and I'm not looking back. You've made your choices and now you have to live with them." For a long moment, there was only silence on the other end of the line. I could almost hear him processing my words, realizing that this time, I wasn't the same woman who had fallen for his manipulations. Then his voice cracked. "I don't know where to go. Everything's gone. I have nothing left." His vulnerability was almost laughable. But I didn't feel anger anymore. I just felt nothing. The emptiness I had once feared was gone, replaced with an undeniable sense of peace. "I'm sorry, Chris," I said, my words softer than I had intended. "But you did this. Not me." I hung up before he could say another word. As the phone call ended, I realized that I wasn't just saying goodbye to Chris. I was saying goodbye to the person I had been. I was letting go of all the hurt, all the resentment, all the damage he had caused in my life. I didn't need him to apologize. I didn't need him to make amends. I had already forgiven myself, and that was enough. The sound of the phone disconnecting echoed in my mind for a moment before it faded into the background. For the first time, I felt truly free. Chris was gone. The man who had once held so much power over me was now just a shadow, a distant memory that no longer had any hold on my heart. I sat there for a while, staring at the phone, feeling lighter than I had in years. Alex came into the room, sensing something had changed. He didn't ask any questions. He just sat down beside me, his arm around my shoulders, and let me breathe. "I'm proud of you," he said quietly. And I realized in that moment that I was proud of myself too. It's strange how quickly life can change when you stop allowing the past to dictate your future. I had spent so many years tied to Chris, to Mark, to my failures, but now I was living for me. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving, and I had finally come to understand what true freedom felt like. With each passing day, my confidence grew. I no longer carried the weight of the mistakes they had made. No more guilt, no more shame. And most importantly, no more pretending to be someone I wasn't just to keep others happy. Jason was doing great. Watching him grow into the young man he had become filled me with pride. I could see how much he had learned from my own journey, how he had witnessed me not only survive but rise from the ashes. We spent more time together, rebuilding the bond we'd once lost during the chaos of my marriage and the years I spent focusing on everyone but myself. But as my relationship with Alex blossomed, I realized something that had never quite hit me before. I didn't need validation from anyone. Not from Chris. Not from Mark. Not even from my family. My worth wasn't defined by the men in my life or the choices they made, it was defined by how I saw myself. I learned to live with grace, not the kind I had once hoped for but the kind that came from deep within. I stopped caring about proving myself, stopped needing anyone to affirm my worth. And once I stopped seeking approval, once I stopped looking for something that had been out of my reach for so long, the world opened up in ways I hadn't expected. Alex and I had taken things slow, but now everything felt right. There was no rush, no pressure. Just two people who appreciated each other's company and respected each other's space. We didn't need to label things. We didn't need to rush toward anything. We were just enjoying life together in the present. And as I looked at my life, I realized that I had everything I needed. I had peace. I had love. I had my son, and I had the woman I was becoming. There was no space for regret, no space for fear. Just the here and now. But there was something else. Something I hadn't expected to feel. There was a sense of purpose. I had spent so many years living for everyone else, trying to fix what was broken, trying to make other people happy. But now I could finally focus on what mattered to me. I had always loved gardening, something I'd picked up as a child, and I had spent so much of my life pushing it aside. But now I decided it was time to invest in myself, to nurture something real. I started a small garden in the backyard of my new home. Alex helped me build the raised beds, and Jason joined in when he had the time. It wasn't much, just a few vegetables and flowers, but it was mine. It was something I could grow, something I could be proud of. It was a metaphor for my own life, a reminder that with time, patience, and care, beautiful things could grow from the most difficult circumstances. As I sat in the garden one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I couldn't help but smile. I thought back to the woman I had once been, the one who had been broken, who had been lost in a world of lies and manipulation. She seemed so far away now. She was part of my story, but she wasn't the one writing it anymore. I was the one writing my story now. And it felt damn good. It's funny how life has a way of coming full circle when you least expect it. A few years ago, I was lost in a web of manipulation and betrayal, unsure of how I would ever break free from the toxic relationships that had defined my existence. I had been living in a constant state of survival, fighting battles I didn't even know I was fighting. But now, here I was, standing in my own power, surrounded by love, and free from the past that had once controlled me. The last year had been transformative. My relationship with Alex had deepened, though we never rushed to label it. It wasn't about titles or expectations. It was about being present, about sharing moments, about building something real. We had our ups and downs, but every challenge we faced brought us closer. We understood each other's pasts, respected our scars, and supported each other's dreams. Jason had blossomed into a young man who, just like me, understood the value of forging your own path. He had gone off to college, and though I missed him more than words could say, I knew that he was growing into the person he was meant to be. I had given him everything I could, but now I was seeing him take those lessons and make them his own. But life wasn't done surprising me. One afternoon when I was out running errands, I ran into someone I never thought I would see again. Darla. I had heard whispers here and there about her, how she had left Chris, how she had distanced herself from everything that had gone wrong. I didn't know what I expected when I saw her in the grocery store, but I didn't expect the woman standing in front of me. She looked different. Not just physically but emotionally. Her posture wasn't as stiff, her eyes no longer had the same guarded look they had years ago when she was with Chris. She seemed free. She recognized me immediately. Her eyes widened, and for a split second, I saw a flicker of regret in them. But then, just as quickly, it was replaced by something else. Perhaps acceptance, perhaps resignation. She wasn't trying to hide behind her facade anymore. Neither of us was. We stood there for a moment, both of us unsure of what to say. But then Darla spoke, her voice softer than I expected. "Emma," she said, her tone almost apologetic. "I've heard about you. You're doing well, aren't you?" I nodded, not sure where this conversation was going. "I'm fine," I said, keeping it simple. I didn't need to get into all the details. I didn't need to justify my life to her. There was a long pause. Neither of us seemed eager to continue the conversation, but Darla spoke again, her voice filled with an honesty I hadn't expected. "I'm sorry," she said, her eyes meeting mine. "For everything. For what happened. I know it doesn't mean much now, but I wanted you to know." I could have chosen to hold on to the anger, to lash out and tell her how much she had hurt me. But in that moment I realized something. It didn't matter anymore. The past was just that, the past. I had healed, and holding on to that anger would only weigh me down. "It's okay," I said, surprising myself. "I've moved on. We all have." Darla nodded, looking almost relieved. "I can see that," she said quietly. "I think we all had our roles to play in this messed up story. And for what it's worth, I regret the way I played mine." We stood there for a few more moments, the tension between us dissolving slowly. I wasn't ready to forgive her, and I wasn't ready to open any doors that had been shut for good. But I had learned that forgiveness wasn't always about the other person. It was about freeing yourself from the chains they had tried to wrap around you. As we parted ways, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The chapter was closed. I had let go of the bitterness, the anger, the need for revenge. I had forgiven myself. And that was enough. It was then that I realized how far I had come. The woman who had once been consumed by pain, by the need to seek justice, was no longer the woman standing in front of Darla. I had stepped into my own power, and I no longer needed anyone's approval to define who I was. As I drove home that afternoon, I felt a sense of peace settle within me. I had come full circle, from the broken woman who had left her marriage to the woman who had now built a life of her own. A life filled with love, respect, and the knowledge that I didn't need anyone to complete me. I was whole. And that, more than anything, was the greatest gift I could have ever given myself.